I am so thrilled to welcome all of you and welcome you to this very, very special dialogue between two women who so powerfully embody the Wellesley spirit. Women who have and continue to transform the world. We are always honored, Secretary Albright, to have you on campus, and just thank you. And again, what a privilege it is this year to welcome this year's distinguished visiting professor, President Atifete Jahjaga. Thank you. She is Kosovo's first woman president and clearly an inspiring advocate for women's rights and for women's leadership, and we welcome you. So tonight we are so fortunate to host these two remarkable women, leaders who are here to share their wealth of experience, their perspective, and most importantly, their thoughts for finding a way forward, a new way forward. Something I think we can all agree, particularly today, in this new world that we find ourselves, is so critically important. One of our Albright Fellows will be telling you more about President Jahjaga, but I can tell you that, again, after having met, the honor of having met with President Jahjaga on Tuesday morning, she is a thoughtful, innovative, outstanding leader, and we have a tremendous amount to learn from her. The two of us had a very productive dialogue of our own about empowering women, and how when we empower a woman, we empower much of society. The domino effect is profound. And I was particularly grateful to talk with her about the role that Wellesley plays and must increasingly play to advance women's education and the rights of women, both here in the United States and around the world. And we both believe that this is a global and moral imperative, and that Wellesley is uniquely positioned to serve as a powerful advocate for women. So I cannot pass up the opportunity to quickly acknowledge some of the very special people in this room. First, let me welcome the esteemed members of the Albright Ambassadors Council. Thank you all for everything that you do and continue to do for the Albright Institute. I want to welcome Prudence Prudy Krauser, class of '62 and former trustee, Marcia Burrick. I don't know where, I haven't seen everybody. Marcia, thank you for being here, class of '62. B.D. Ladd, class of '58. Welcome. Susan Terrace, class of '59. Welcome. And the chair of the Ambassadors Council, Winnie Freund. Winnie, where are you? Welcome. It's great to see you again. And Dame Amelia Fawcett, class of 1978, who was the winter session keynote speaker and really kicked off our session. Amelia, welcome. Thank you for all the work you do to support the Institute and what you continue to do to support our students. I also want to acknowledge and welcome Amy Batchelor, class of '88, former trustee, whose generosity has made possible the Anchor Point Global Leadership Fellowship that really allows students to be cultivated in terms of leadership through internships around the globe. And I just want to say a shout out to our fellows. You are an extraordinary group of young women. You are from all over the globe, and your emerging leadership, your dedication to making a difference in the world, your dedication to each other, and your dedication to Wellesley is truly heartfelt and profound. And as I've had conversations with those faculty who have been with you and other guests, the one thing they say to me is that the questions and the dialogue that you have spurred has been most intriguing and really has been most stimulating. And is like no other dialogue that others have experienced in similar groups. So thank you for your commitment. And of course, we have a world-class roster of Albright faculty and presenters at this year's Institute. Thank you for spending your time with us. We truly appreciate it. And of course, I have to give our two leaders, Takis Metaxas. Takis, you are the Albright Institute's faculty director and professor of computer science. You are focused on how the web is changing the way we think, decide, and act as individuals and members of social communities. And you're also working on identifying identifying fake news. And in today's world, what you are doing is absolutely critical. And so thank you for your brilliance and for your leadership. And Joanne, the director of the Albright Institute, and your staff, we cannot thank you enough for your leadership, your work in really making this all happen. And it takes the year to do this. And you were working on this throughout the year, working on looking at not only how we develop the program, but also working with the secretary, working with the council, and also thinking about how we develop those relationships with places around the world for fellowships. So thank you, Joanne. So finally, I am pleased to share with you a few words about the woman without whom none of this would be possible. Madeleine K. Albright, class of 1959. We, indeed the world, know her as the first woman to become Secretary of State, the highest ranking woman in the history of US government when you were confirmed in 1997. Whose distinguished service to this country calls up words like trailblazer, visionary, whose life and career can be defined with adjectives like bold, fierce, and fearless. We may know her as the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor presented by President Obama in 2012, or as a globally renowned advocate for women, women's education, equality, and a guiding light for women leaders everywhere. But at Wellesley, we also know her as a devoted Wellesley alumna whose legacy can be seen in 8 years of Albright Fellows who are already changing the world for the better. We know her as a role model for so many of our students who come, and let me be very clear, many just state that they come to hope to follow in your footsteps. Secretary Albright, I speak for the entire college when I say that our administration, that our admiration and gratitude to you are endless. And we are so, so honored by your presence here tonight. So I am now going to hand over the podium to current Albright Fellow Arella Haluchi, who will introduce President Jahjaga. Arella, oh, there you are.
Secretary Albright, President Johnson, honorable guests, directors, staff, and fellows of the Albright Institute. I am Marela Haluchi, and it is my honor and unique pleasure to introduce tonight the former president of Kosovo, Atifete Jahjaga. To our nation, the Albanian people, she is an emblem of public service. From her early days in Kosovo's first police force, she gave Albanians around the world the unique pleasure of finally seeing an Albanian police force patrolling the streets of Kosovo. She rose to her task as president with grace, strength, and determination, a leader who walks right by her citizens in the process of achieving prosperity. Her example of leadership now resonates worldwide. And we are happy to have her among us today as the 2017 Mary Jane Durnford Distinguished Professor of Albright Institute. Please join me in welcoming President Jahjaga.
I really am very happy to be here and to have the opportunity again to have a chance to meet with the Albright Fellows, which is really a remarkable group. We are going to take over the world. They need us. And so I enjoyed my sessions this afternoon, and I look forward to spending a lot more time with you. But I'm delighted to be here with the President. We are very good friends. We met some years ago when President Jahjaga was hosting a women's conference in Pristina, and I was delighted to come, and we have stayed in very close touch since, and having you here makes all the difference of putting together you with this incredible institute and introducing you to Wellesley and Wellesley to you. So it is wonderful, really, to have this opportunity. We were going to talk about tonight the issue of nationalism and globalization, and I think we have quite a lot to say, but mostly the questions. And so I wanted to begin by explaining my connection to Kosovo and why, when people ask me what I'm proudest of as Secretary of State, I say Kosovo. And it's a very complicated story, and it really does depict the issue of nationalism and globalization. Life is very peculiar and full of coincidences, and the fact that I was in office at a time that things were complicated in the Balkans is the most interesting kind of accident of history. As I said to many of you earlier today, I was born in Czechoslovakia. My father, however, was the Czechoslovak ambassador to Yugoslavia from 1945 to 1948. And the little girl in the national costume that gives flowers at the airport, that's what I did for a living. Yugoslavia was an interesting place. My father had been press attaché there before the war. People thought I'd actually been born in Belgrade, but my mother wanted to have me in Prague, and so I was born in Prague. But I grew up with the story of the Balkans. And when President Clinton came into office, the issue was what was going on in the Balkans. And I was ambassador at the UN, and people were saying, you know, you promised to President Clinton. President Clinton had said, we're going to do something about what's going on in Bosnia, where people were killing each other. And I kept saying, we need to do something about Bosnia, because every single day at the UN, somebody would come up and say, why aren't you doing something about Bosnia? I could spend a whole time talking about that, but we were very slow. And so when I became secretary and we saw ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, I thought, even though I'd been a cabinet member during the Bosnia issue, I now was Secretary of State, and we were going to do something. And it was complicated. It's one of the most interesting kind of case studies in terms of having to persuade your own government to do something, and then trying to deal with the fact that the Russians were going to veto a resolution in the Security Council to do something about Kosovo. They were going to veto it, so we went to NATO. And I do think it is one of the more interesting and complicated case studies. The issue was whether people had a right to have an independent country and to be able to run themselves and not be killed, ethnically cleansed for who they were, not anything that they had ever done. And Kosovo was a very good example of that. Kosovo was a part of Serbia. And they did not, and it had been an autonomous region, and the nationalist aspect of that really took hold in terms of people wanting to be themselves. And the question was what the United States should do. It was very complicated. And I have to tell you the story. The Secretary of State can say anything, and that we would use force. However, the State Department has no airplanes. And so the issue was how to get the Pentagon to support us. But the day that it started, we had decided to use air power to help the people of Kosovo. And what happened was that on the first day, the weather was bad. The Serbs had put out decoys. Then there were various other problems. I come into my office one morning, and my executive assistant says, "Sit down." And I said, "What?" He said, "Just sit down." I said, "What is the matter with you?" And he said, "We have just bombed the Chinese embassy by mistake." So everything was going wrong. And at that stage, they called it Madeleine's War. When we won, they called it something else. But the bottom line is that I feel very strongly about the nationalist aspect of people of Kosovo wanting to be who they are. And I'm very proud of my relationship with Kosovo. There's a whole generation of little girls whose first name is Madeleine. But the whole issue here of under what circumstances do people exert and put forward their views about who they are, what their identity is, and what does it do? The problem is that, as we talked about earlier, identity is a very complicated aspect. And I want to put this on the table for you, which is that I believe in multi-ethnic societies. And certainly, Serbia is a very complicated place. There are Orthodox Christians, there are Muslims, there are people that don't believe. And the issue was, originally, when I first went to Kosovo, I went there and the mosques were surrounded by barbed wire and people couldn't go in. I thought that was wrong. After the war was over, I went back and I then saw the Christian churches surrounded by barbed wire. And I thought that was wrong. And I spoke to the parliament there and I said, I believe in multi-ethnic. You have to treat the Serbs that are there with respect. It is a problem, and I think the issue is that we need to talk about is when is nationalism the answer and pride in your own people, and when does it translate into hatred of others? And I know you and I have spoken about this, but I think that is really the issue. How do we identify with who we are without hating the other people? And Kosovo is now an independent country. People are watching it. You were a fantastic president. I say that having watched what you did and somebody who understood the multi-ethnic aspect of things. And so that issue of nationalism versus hyper-nationalism, pride in your own people, how it doesn't turn into discrimination and hatred of others. So it is my pleasure to be with you. Sorry to have put that difficult question, but that is the issue of how can we be proud of what the Kosovars are doing. And you were saying Albanians and how proud people are to be able to speak the language of their choice and do what they want, but how does it take place without deciding that the others need to be suppressed?
Thank you so much, Secretary Albright, my dear, dear friend, and good evening to all of you. Dear President Johnson, thank you for a very warm welcome since the very first moment that I arrived here at the Wellesley Center, and towards all of the Albright Fellows and to the alumni. It is really a pleasure for me to be here this evening with you, and to be able to talk to you and to analyze with you what is truly the paradox of our time. When I was approached about a couple of days ago by the organizers to be a part of this panel together with the Secretary Albright to speak about those two topics, I put a lot of thoughts and a lot of analysis. What would be the best approach, or how I would be bestly summarizing these two topics based on my own experience and based on my own country's experience? Because all of you are scholars here and you do know the best way how those two topics, they do function in theory. But for me it would be the best way to elaborate the way that Secretary Albright started to take in the example of Kosovo, how those two forces, the global globalization and nationalism, they do function into the reality. But before I go to this, I just want to use this opportunity and say and express how thrilled I am to be together with the Secretary Albright to share this podium with a woman that it is because of her that we have ended the 20th century with the greatest triumph of the human rights. And I'll get back to this point in a minute, because before that, I just want to express my deepest thanks and my deepest gratitude to Secretary Albright. It is because of her, because of her determination, because of her vision, and because of her leadership that I am simply with you this evening. And yes, she saved my life. She saved the life of the entire my generation, and she saved the life of my country. And I'm here today with you because of her. So Secretary Albright, thank you for everything that thank you for everything what you have done for my country. Thank you everything what you have done for my people. But mostly, thank you for everything what you have done for the rest of the world and for all of us as the women. And so how did the globalization and nationalism has reflected on me, on my country, and my generation? When the Berlin Wall fell back in 1989, the new era of hope has been spread towards the eastern and the southeastern part of Europe, particularly towards us, the countries who were under the iron grip of the communism and the totalitarian rule. When the wall fell down, it does not only mean that falling the wall between the East and the West, it meant much more than that. It meant a hope for millions of people throughout the Eastern Europe that they were kind of like made by force. They were forced to give up their voice, and they were forced to give up their rights. And so it was a democracy and the human rights that has triumphed at once back in 1989. And all of us who was watching at that time, the Radio Free Europe and the Voice of America, we did not realize that we were becoming the witnesses of the new world order. While all of us, we were at awe by the Václav Havels and the other movements in order to bring the new world order, we did not realize, while in other side we were seeing how the democracy, revolution, human rights, dignity, freedom and peace are setting that in place. We did not realize how these are being reflected towards the countries as it was, if I use the term, artificial countries as it was Yugoslavia, which was established in totally different basis, and how that was reflecting towards the population. While we once seen one side happening in the rest part of the Eastern Europe, we didn't realize how that is going to reflect towards the southeastern part of the Europe, particularly towards the Yugoslavia. And it was the fear and uncertainty throughout the years that has built into this nationalism that was automatically translated into this ideological tool that was automatically taken by Serbia in order to unleash their occupation towards all of other federal republics within former Yugoslavia, where also Kosovo was the autonomous provinces on that. And it was under this banner of the Greater Serbia and under the slogan that Serbia is everywhere where the Serbs live, that the Slobodan Milosevic rose into the power. And in Kosovo, while we were having for over a decade now already a continuous repression where the basic political rights has been suspended, as well as our autonomy has been suspended, we were subjected towards the martial state. state, where our parents were made by force to leave their job just because they were ethnically Albanians. When myself, my generation of students, of the youngsters, were made by force to leave the schools because of our ethnicity. And so the whole society was segregated based into the ethnicity. And if you were not a Serb, you were a kind of like second-class citizen in your own territory, in your own land. And so while we were seeing our country to being destroyed within a night in front of our eyes, because this repression, which prolonged over 15 years of time, which has continued with a violent demonstration, with imprisonment of the political activists, just because they were thinking differently, of the imprisonment of the intellectuals, of the brightest and the best people of our country, which were forced to leave the country, which the country was left without the freedom of speech, without the independent medias. At the same time, while all of this was going on in Kosovo, the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Croatia, where they were already engulfed in the war. And so we end up about 2 decades after to inherit a region which had over 200,000 citizens, which has been killed and massacred in Bosnia and Herzegovina. 10,000 of them in Croatia and 13,000 Kosovar Albanians in Kosovo, and over 1 million of them, as Secretary Albright has referred, that has been made by force to leave their country for the purpose of the ethnic cleansing. And this was happening in front of, or better saying, in the step door of the European Union. And in order to destabilize all of this fragile peace that it took, that finally kind of like reached the entire Europe on that. And so this is how the nationalism has been reflected in our country, but how the globalization has reflected to build in line with the nationalism is that back in the 90s, the new clan of the leadership came in place in Washington and the other powerful countries within the European Union. They were the children of the survivors and the witnesses of the Holocaust, that they made the oath to themselves that this was never going to happen again. And we have seen the example of Kosovo. And globalization has meant putting additional emphasis into the human rights and into the democracy, while the sovereignty has meant, had a meaning, actually the human rights has meant even much higher into that. And it's true, it took for the leadership of the Secretary Albright to say back in 1999, in the spring of 1999, what is enough, it is enough. After seeing the failures in Rwanda and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, after having numerous of the diplomatic attempts to bring both of the sides into the dialogue table, to bring to an end a war which was taking place in the country. It was the direct intervention and the decision by Secretary Albright at that time and the Prime Minister Blair in order to take the decision and to convince the all member state of the NATO to take the step forward for the NATO intervention, which was for the first time in its history of the NATO to take the steps forward to bomb the country for the humanitarian purpose, for the purpose of stopping the genocide and the ethnic cleansing that was taking place in that time. And so because of this intervention, in 12th of June 1999, Kosovo finally got its liberation. And in 2008, we got our independence. And with help of our allies and the strong friends, we set the first foundations to build our country, to build the independent state of the Kosovo, multi-ethnic state of Kosovo, which we respect the diversities of all of the communities. and that we made an oath at that time that we will never allow to happen towards all of the citizens of our countries, no matter Kosovo Albanians or Kosovo Serbs or Kosovo Roma or other ethnicity group, what has happened to us for the past 2.5 decades. Yes, Secretary Albright, we were not proud about some action that has taken place immediately in aftermath of the war by some individual groups in our country by destroying the monasteries and other cultural heritages, which they are the cultural heritages of our country, because the Serbian community in Kosovo, they are the citizens of Kosovo, and I wanted them always to feel and to be proud to being the citizens of Kosovo. And I always refer to that we should never ever use our citizens as the bargaining chip, but we should be able as leaders to set up the grounds and the foundation to make them as a bridges of the cooperation. It was enough of the suffering and the terrible past. It is up in our hands what kind of the country we are leaving behind for our younger generation to be moving further.
Thank you. I do think that this is an incredibly complicated story, and I just was asked to tape a series. As you know, CNN has been running an issue about the decades, and I just did one on the 90s. And it made me kind of think through what was going on. You said the fall of the Berlin Wall. Well, it was very interesting in terms of the 90s open, and the first President Bush really did the reunification of Germany, and there was a great sense of hope about what was going to happen with the end of the Cold War. President Clinton constantly was saying to us that we were building bridges to the 21st century. And the idea was, what kind of a world was it going to be that all of a sudden, after 50 years of communism, there was a new sense of possibility? Well, that was the positive part. The negative part was that with the end of the Cold War, the ground defrosted and the worms started crawling around. And the worms were the variety of ethnic conflicts that had been suppressed in a number of different ways. I think the Balkans are incredibly complicated in terms of the intersection of a variety of different groups. But, and you mentioned Milosevic, Milosevic used the kind of flag of nationalism in order to rouse people to hate somebody else. And so it was a very weird period in this particular way of the hope of the end of the Cold War, and yet again, the problems of hyper-nationalism by small groups. And the Balkans really symbolized all of it. And the question is, then what? How do we deal with this? Because Milosevic clearly stirred up nationalism. There are those now who are stirring up nationalism. And the question is, how does one lower the temperature and realize that somehow multi-ethnic or states that respect each other are able to work together on this? But it's harder than it looks. And I really do think, this isn't just you and me praising each other, but the bottom line is, I do think that when you were president, there was a different atmosphere. And the question is how nationalism keeps being kind of raised in order to hit the other people over the head. The Serbs are behaving terribly, there's no question. I know you talked about the train that was going on, and one can always find something. I am truly, as I said, I'm proudest of Kosovo. I think people think I'm responsible for everything in Kosovo, even to this day. But I think that it has an opportunity to really be the jewel here in terms of a very small country that has gone through hell, that is able to show the importance of multi-ethnic societies. But it's very hard in the current atmosphere.
Secretary Albright, you are very right. It is a very hard process and is particularly hard in the current circumstances. But the key to the solution to all of the situation, that we have inherited for this past 2.5 or 3 decades in the entire region of the southeastern part of Europe, and which would respond towards the nationalism, and it would be in the support of this globalization, what has been trying to bring since the fall of the Berlin Wall is the integration. It is the integration within the country and the regional integration. Something that I have been many times even saying public towards the European Union. This continuous hesitance of the European Union and this fatigue of the European Union towards the southeastern part of the Europe about this prolonged process. We are very conscious. We do know that it is not only one-way process, the process of the integration, and we do know that we have a lot of homework as the countries individually aspiring to become a member state of the European Union. But at the same time, we have this momentum that the European Union is not realizing the danger and the risk that we have it in front of our eyes, that if we don't act it now, we might be, I don't know when we will be able to be back in the track that we are at the moment. All of us as the countries, we are aspiring, and this is the biggest luck for the entire region of the southeastern part of the Europe, being in Kosovo, being in Serbia, being in Bosnia and Herzegovina, being in Macedonia, or being in Albania. All of us are aspiring to become a member state of the European Union. So while we have that momentum, while the European Union has that momentum, I don't know why they don't use this momentum on the benefit, not only helping the southeastern part of the Europe, but itself helping themselves as the European Union. So in the long term, they don't kind of like import some of the elements that will definitely not contribute to itself, the European Union. If I may say that the situation in the Ukraine that we are seeing today, I think it is a large portion of that deals also with the hesitation and way too much of bureaucracy of the European Union to take some steps and to take some actions in the time when it was necessary. And so by having these hesitancies, we are giving the vacuum towards the elements of the nationalisms to grow within the countries. And so if we take the rhetorics in Serbia, which is majorly in the entire region, all of their rhetorics, even of their current leadership there, it is based into these nationalistic ideas that will not contribute itself to the Serbia, and not even imagining how that will be reflected towards Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, or towards Montenegro in this regard. And so it's about us as a countries to do our homework for our internal integration between all of the community groups and between all of the ethnic groups. But also we cannot do that without the help of the European Union that we are aspiring to reach that final destination.
I want to open it up for questions, but let me just say the following thing, that this is where we come to today, which is what is the role of the United States in this? Because what happened when all this started, the United States, President Bush was in, the first President Bush was in office. We had just finished the Gulf War. Secretary Baker said that we had no dog in the fight. We're not interested in what was going on in the Balkans. The Europeans would take care of it. The Europeans did not take care of it. The United States got into it. We now are saying that we're not interested in anything, I think is what we're saying. We are not interested in Europe. We are not interested in NATO. We are trying to figure out what the Russians are doing. The Russians are, in fact, in very close contact with the Serbs. Any number of different things. So I think the question of nationalism and globalization is not just a story of Kosovo in the 90s, but it is a question now of what the U.S. role is going to be, how we get involved, and what it is that the Europeans are going to do. And we earlier had a discussion about what is going on in Europe. Is Europe capable of doing this? So I think that this is very much an issue of the day. And so I think let's have some questions from all of you.